Hey guys, welcome to Punky's World. I actually have a couple of videos planned here. This one's the wrestling video. This is the stories from the Body Slams book. There are so many, but I broke it down to these few. He talks about Gorilla Monsoon and how Gorilla Monsoon was sort of known as a man monster. Gorilla Monsoon was like, I don't know, 6'6", 6'7", and just a big boy. And he was actually very well educated. You'll notice that when he commentates and he names body parts and he names them like anatomically, like occipital protuberance, meaning this area back here. And well, he was that way because one of his degrees was in anatomy. One of his degrees was in business. He was just very, very well educated and smart. And he ran WWWF shows in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. He also supervised all TV. So even though they joked around a lot about him being Bobby Heenan's boss, quote unquote, on prime time, he actually was Bobby Heenan's boss. So, and Gary talks about going on a road trip with Mick Foley, aka Cactus Jack, because Mick wanted to be home when his family woke up. So he said, "Can you go with me? You know, can we drive through together?" Sure, why not? And he just thought Mick was always a wonderful family man, and he just thought that was awesome. And like every other guy that I've read or heard anything from, he loved Bobby Eaton. Bobby had a weak tummy, believe it or not, for things like blood. Bobby didn't do well. And Jim hit a man over the head with his, well, I talked about it actually in the Jim Cornette book video, which I'll put up here. And the guy ended up bleeding, and yeah, it made Bobby sick to his stomach. It made Gary Capetta sick to his stomach, and they ended up bonding. I wanted to tell you about Ernie Roth, also known as the Grand Wizard. He was a manager. He died of a heart attack. I really don't. I vaguely have some memory of him, like with Arnold Skaaland. Only I know better who Arnold Skaaland was because I think Arnie's still alive. No, Arnie did pass away, but he was quite old when he passed away, and was an amazing manager. My dad really liked him. So, yeah, he managed all the great babyface world champions and stuff back in the day, but we'll get there. But Ernie Roth was a bad guy manager. And he used to tell Gary Capetta stories about how Vince Sr. wanted Vince Jr. to take over, which did happen. But he also told him how Vince Jr. had bought a small venue. It's like a theater. And they didn't do wrestling there. It was a theater. They did live theater there. And on Cape Cod. And he would bring Shane there to clean up after shows, to work with the cleanup crew. Because he wanted Shane to start from the bottom, just like he did. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's good values, actually. Teaching Shane that he's no better than anybody else. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's good values being taught. And I'm not a big fan of Vince Jr. I'm just not. Ow. Anyway, my giant cold sore is killing me. But I do think that that was good. And Ernie would talk about when he was in World War II. He was stationed in Asia. And you couldn't get silk here in the United States because of the war. They weren't importing it. And he would buy bolts and bolts of it for this vaudeville lady, and I guess theater actress that he was really good friends with. There was never a relationship between the two. They were just really good friends. They were like best friends. I almost thought that, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, just the little I knew of him, I thought he might bat for the other team. You know, and of course he wouldn't have been able to say that because he was in the service, and you know, that was such a no-no back then. So ridiculous. And he would send them to her. And the next story I have for you actually comes from my dad. My dad used to tell me, you know, we would walk around town here, and he would tell me when he was young and hanging out in town here, because even though he lived in Manchog, which is the village in Sutton, that is right next door where we've walked to the cemetery and all of that, he hung out with guys from Douglas. He didn't hang out with guys from Sutton for the most part. He hung out with guys from Douglas. And so he would be in Douglas and he would see Ivan Putski just walking down the road in Douglas, and it was like, holy cow. And he said he was such a big man, and he had this big barrel chest, and he just was huge. He said he was a regular guy. He just, you know, frequented businesses in town and just was a regular guy in town. He didn't act like he was a big deal, even though all of us kids are going, he said it was just a regular guy, and I think that's really cool. And he used to go to Webster. Oh gosh, I can't remember the name of the place, and he's not around for me to ask anymore. But they had a small venue there, and it must have been Worldwide Wrestling Federation, WWWF, back then, during that time period, because we're talking 50s and 60s, when Vince Sr. was still running things. And he met all kinds of wrestlers there, because it was such a small venue. You met the wrestlers, you know. You shook hands with them, you watched them wrestle, you know. It was such a small venue, you couldn't help that. And he used to just regale me with his memories of that. And you know, a bunch of the guys would get together and go, and I think there's a bar or something where they had it, and it was just the memories, you know. I loved listening to his memories of that stuff, and I just wanted to share it with you so that I always had it, you know, on film. I wish I could have interviewed him on film. That would have been neat, you know, and talked to him about those memories, you know, before he got sick. I remember when I first saw The Fallen Angel, that character, and this is getting back to my dad. This is coming back to what I was talking about. I didn't change the subject. And I showed him to my dad. This was eons ago, before TNA. But it was after he was bald. So it had to be around 2000. And I remember showing him to my dad. He did a few matches in ECW and a couple of other things, and I wondered where he went because I just thought he was unbelievable. He had this big feud, and I just thought the character was unbelievable. I thought in the ring he was unbelievable. On the microphone, he was just unbelievable. And I showed him to my dad, and my dad thought, yeah, he's kind of a throwback. And but I never got to show him later on, because he died before, when CD became champion, he had died. And so I never got to show him, and he never got to see the sweet man who's become, what would you call him to me? He's definitely, I guess you'd call him an acquaintance in a way, that writes to me in private messages on Twitter, and it's just so sweet. And I wish my father could have seen that person, But yeah, he talked about him being a throwback, because my father liked wrestlers who could wrestle. He liked rich characters. Rich meaning deep. He liked, to him it didn't really matter if you were a babyface or a heel. For instance, my father loved the Hart Foundation. They were his favorite. Whether they were heel or babyface, it didn't matter to him. Because nobody wrestled like Bret. That excellence of execution fit him perfectly. And I believe it was Gorilla Monsoon that coined that, by the way. The excellence of execution, originally. And my father just, they were his favorite. He liked Neidhart's sort of colorfulness and his power, and Bret's wrestling ability, And I just think he would have really enjoyed watching Christopher Daniels wrestle. I know you got to see him early on. Like I said, I want to say it was ECW where I saw him at first. And it was right after he went bald. So it had to be around 2000 because he did not have hair. And I remember the costume, the vestments, and it was just, he was incredible. And finding him years later, when I was following AJ Styles, I went back to watch his old TNA and finding Christopher Daniels there, and I'm like, I know I've seen this guy. And I had to think about it. And so, yeah, I'm so grateful, though, that my mother did get to see his kindness. And my mother said she could see it in his eyes. And it was funny because he was looking at a picture someone drew of him, and he said, "You captured the kindness in my eyes." And it was weird that he said that because my mother had just said, "I see the kindness in his eyes." And for him to say that to the person who drew the picture of him not long after my mother said that was really weird. But yeah, I would have liked my father to know I became acquainted. And that, Bobby Eaton, my father would have been thrilled for me. Actually, he might have been alive when I became the official, my page became Bobby's official page. I'm not sure, but yeah, very blessed. I couldn't have imagined my love of wrestling would actually turn into something, But it all started with my dad. You know, he grew up with it, and I started watching it to hang out with him. And I guess the Iron Claw is now in production. They do have their Fritz. Now, it'll be interesting to see if they do sort of young and old. You know what I mean? Like with Fritz, if they go back and forth a little bit. If they do, they're going to need two, because... And they're going to need an old man who's pretty big. You know, a large size man. Actually a perfect actor for it, but he died. Brian Dennehy. He would have been perfect. And I say that because they could have transformed his face. He's an older man, but he's a big man. And I just think he could have pulled off the character, the older Fritz, you know, really well. And a little bit of makeup, you know. Maybe darken the hair just a little bit. Not even darken it, just whiten it a little. Because he was a blonde. Brian Dennehy was. And so, yeah, it's, I think it's going to be interesting. And I can't wait to see it, actually. Thank you so much for joining me on this wrestling memories and stories from my book. I hope you enjoyed it. Coming up, we have a different video entirely. We're going to go through these books that I just got at the free yard sale and try to find something interesting to make. We're going to do that together. I thought it would be fun. Obviously, this one here I just want to go through. So we'll put that to the side. Because that's not a cookbook. That's just fun tips for stuff. Oh, they even have history and strange facts about stuff. That's so cool. But yeah, I can't wait to excuse me. So yeah, we'll come back and do that. Thank you so much for joining me. God bless you. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.